Trolls' purses are the mischief, and this was no exception.
Yeah, who are you?
It squeaked as it left the pocket, and William turned round at once and grabbed Bilbo by the neck before he could duck behind the tree.
"Blimey, Bert, look what I've copped,"
said William.
"What is it?"
said the others, coming up.
"Blimey, if I knows, what are you?"
Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit, said poor Bilbo, shaking all over and wondering how to make owl noises before they throttled him.
A burra hobbit?
They said, a bit startled. Trolls are slow in the uptake and mighty suspicious without anything new.
What's a burra hobbit got to do with my pockets anyways?
Said William.
And can you cook 'em?
Said Tom.
You can try,
said Bert, picking up a skewer.
He wouldn't make more than a mouthful,
said William, who had already had a fine supper.
Not when he was skinned and boned. Perhaps there's more of them about. We can make a pie, said
Bert.
Here, you. Are there any more of your sort sneaking here in the woods, you nasty little rabbit?
Said he, looking at the hobbit's furry feet, and he picked him up by the toes and shook him. Yes, lots, said Bilbo, before he remembered not to give his friends away. No, none, not one, he said immediately afterwards.
Well, what do you mean?
What I say, said Bilbo, gasping. And please don't cook me, kind sirs. I'm a good cook myself, and cook better than I cook, if you see what I mean. I'll cook beautifully for you, a beautiful, perfectly beautiful breakfast, if only you just don't have me for supper.
Poor little blighter,
said William. He had already had as much supper as he could hold. Also, he had had lots of beer.
Poor little blighter, let him go. Not till he says what he means by lots and none at all,
said Bert.
I don't want to have my throat cut in sleep. Hold his toes over the fire till he talks. I won't have it,
said William.
I caught him anyway, he's mine. You're a fat fool, William,
said Bert.
As I've said afore this evening, and you're a lout. And I won't take much from you, Bill Huggins, said
Bert, and puts his fist in William's eye. Then there was an enormous row. Bilbo had just enough wits left when Bert dropped him on the ground to scramble out of the way of their feet before they were fighting like dogs and calling all sorts to each other. Perfectly true and applicable names in very loud voices. Soon they were locked in one another's arms and rolling nearly into the fire, kicking and thumping, while Tom whacked them with a big branch to try and bring them to their senses, but that just, of course, made them madder than ever. Well, that would have been time for Bilbo to have left, but the poor little fellow, his feet had been squashed in Bert's big paw, he had no breath in his body, his head was spinning round and round, and he lay there panting just out of the circle of firelight. It was just at this moment that in the middle of the fight up came Balin. The dwarves have heard noises in the distance, and after waiting some time either for Bilbo to come back or hoot like an owl, they started off one by one to creep toward the light as quietly as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come into the light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply detest the very sight of dwarfs uncooked. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately and,
"A sack, Tom, quick!"
they said, before Balin, who was wondering where in all this commotion Bilbo was, knew what was happening. A sack was over his head, and he was down.
"There's more to come yet," said
Tom,
"or I'm mighty mistook. Lots and none at all it is,"
said he.
"No burra hobbits, but lots of these here dwarfs. That's about the shape of it." I reckon you're right," said Bert, "and we best get out of the firelight."
And so they did. With sacks in their hands that they used for carrying off mutton and other plunder, they waited in the shadows. As each dwarf came up and looked at the fire and the spilled jugs and the gnawed mutton in surprise, pop went a nasty, smelly sack over his head, and he was down. Soon, Dwalin lay by Balin, and Killy and Filly together, and Dory and Nori and Ori all in a heap, and Owen and Glowin and Biffer and Buffer and Bomber piled uncomfortably near the fire.
"That'll teach 'em,"
said Tom, for Bifur and Bomber had given a lot of trouble and fought like mad, as dwarfs will when cornered. Thorin came last, and he was not caught unawares. He came expecting mischief and didn't need to see his friend's legs sticking out of sacks to tell him that things were not at all too well. He stood outside of the shadows some way off and said, "What's all this trouble? Who's been knocking my people about?" It's trolls," said Bilbo from behind a tree. They'd forgotten all about him. They're hiding in the bushes with sacks, said he. Oh, are they? Said Thorin, and he jumped toward the fire before they could leap on him. He caught up a big branch, all on fire at one end, and Bert got that end in his eye before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best. He caught hold of Tom's leg as well as he could. It was thick as a tree trunk for the young hobbit, and he was sent spinning up to the top of some bushes when Tom kicked sideways, the sparks up into Thorin's face. Tom got the branch in his teeth for that and lost one of his front ones. It made him howl, I can tell you. But just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Thorin's head and down to his toes. And so the fight ended. A nice pickle they were all in now, all neatly tied up in sacks with 3 angry trolls, 2 with burns and bashes to remember, sitting by them arguing whether they should roast them slowly, mince them fine, or boil them, or just sit on them one by one and squash them into a jelly. And Bilbo up in a bush with his clothes and his skin torn, not daring to move for fear they should hear him. It was just then that Gandalf came back, but no one saw him. The trolls had just decided to roast the dwarfs now and eat them later. That was Bert's idea, and after a lot of arguing, they'd all agreed to it.
No good roasting 'em. It takes all night,
said a voice. Bert thought it was William's.
Don't start the argument all over again, Bill,
he said,
or I'll take all night. It will. Who's arguing?
said William, who thought it was Bert who had spoken.
You are,
said Bert.
You're a liar,
said William, and so the argument begun all over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them. So they got a great black pot and they took out their knives.
No good boiling them. We can't get any water. It's a long way off to the well and all, or to the river,
said a voice. Bert and Williams thought it was Tom's.
Shut up,
they said.
Oh, we'll never have done. You can fetch the water yourself if you say that any more. Shut up yourself,
said Tom, who thought it was William's voice.
Who's arguing but you, I'd like to know. You're a booby,
said William.
Booby yourself,
said Tom. And so the argument begun all over again and went on hotter than ever, until at last they decided to sit on the sacks one by one and squash them and boil them.
Well, who shall sit on them first?
said the voice.
Better sit on the last fellow first,
said Bert, whose eye had been damaged by Thorin. He thought Tom was talking.
Don't talk to yourself,
said Tom.
But if it was you who wants to sit on the first one, sit on him. Which is he? The one with the yellow stockings,
said Bert.
Nonsense, the one with the grey stockings,
said a voice like William's.
I made sure it was yellow,
said Bert. Yellow it was, said William.
Then what did you say it was grey for?
said Bert.
I never did. Tom said it. That I never did,
said Tom.
It was you. 2-1, so shut your mouth,
said Bert.
Who are you talking to?
said William.
Now stop it,
said Tom and Bert together.
The night's getting on and dawn comes early. Let's get on with it.
Dawn take you all and be stoned to you, said a voice that sounded like William's, but it wasn't. For just at that moment the light came over the hill, and there was a mighty twitter in the branches. William never spoke, for he stood turned to stone as he stooped, and Bert and Tom were stuck like rocks as they looked at him. And there they stand to this day, all alone, unless the birds perch on them, for trolls, as you probably know, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountains that they're made of and never move again. That is what happened to Bert and Tom and William. Excellent, said Gandalf, as he stepped from behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb down out of the thorn bush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard's voice that kept the trolls bickering and quarrelling until the light came and made an end to them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarfs. They were very nearly suffocated and very annoyed. They had not at all enjoyed lying there listening to the trolls making plans for roasting them, squashing them, mincing them. They had to hear Bilbo's account of what happened to him twice over before they were satisfied. Silly time to go practising pinching and pocket-picking, said Bombur, when what we wanted was fire and food. And that's what you wouldn't have got of those fellows without a struggle in any case, said Gandalf. Anyway, you're wasting time now. Don't you realise trolls must have a cave or a hole dug somewhere nearby to hide from the sun? We must look into it." They searched about and soon found the tracks of the troll's stony boots going away through the trees. They followed the tracks up the hill until, hidden by bushes, they came to a big door of stone leading to a cave. But they could not open it, not though they all pushed, while Gandalf tried various incantations. Would this be any good?" asked Bilbo, when they were getting tired and angry. I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight." He held out a largish key, though no doubt William had thought it very small and secret. It must have fallen out of his pocket, very luckily, before he was turned to stone. "Why on earth didn't you mention it before?" they cried. Gandalf grabbed it and fitted it into the keyhole. Then the stone door swung back with one big push, and they were all inside. There were bones on the floor and a nasty smell in the air, but there was a good deal of food jumbled carelessly on shelves and on the ground, among an untidy litter of plunder of all sorts, from brass buttons to pots full of gold coins standing in the corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I'm afraid they belonged to victims, and among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. Two caught their eyes particularly because of their beautiful scabbards and jewelled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin took one of these each, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was as good as a short sword for a hobbit. "These look like good blades," said Gandalf, half drawing them and looking at them curiously. "They were not made by any troll, nor by any smith amongst men in these parts and days, but when we can read the runes on them we shall know more about them. Let's get out of this horrible smell," said Philly. So they carried out the pots and coins and such food as was untouched and looked fit to eat, also one barrel of ale, which was still full. By the time they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn their noses up at what they had got from the troll's larder. That was edible. Their own provisions were very scanty after all the adventures. Now they had breads and cheeses, plenty of ale, and bacon to toast in the embers of the fire of the trolls. After that they slept, for the night had been disturbed, and they did nothing more till the afternoon. Then they brought up the ponies and carried away the pots of gold and buried them very secretly not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them just in case they had ever had the chance to come back and recover them. When that was done, they all mounted once more and jogged along on the path towards the east. Where did you go, if I may ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. "To look ahead," said he. "And, what, pray tell, brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind," said he. "Exactly," said Thorin, "but could you be more plain?" "Well, I went on to spy the road ahead. It'll soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I'd not gone very far, however, when I met a couple of friends of mine from Rivendell." Where's that?" asked Bilbo. Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You'll get there in a few days now if you're lucky and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met these two friends, Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of trolls. It was they who came up and told me the three of them had come down from the mountains, settled in the woods not far from here. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid all strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw the fire in the distance and made for it. So, now you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shan't get anywhere." "Thank you," said Thorin. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They had begun to feel that danger was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they have gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place full of the noise of stone and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very